Welcome to Bespoken Bones with your host, Pavini Moray, connecting ancestors, sex, magic, and science. Pavini explores transpersonal tools for erotic wellness every new and full moon, engaging educators, healers, spiritual leaders, and scientists in revolutionary dialogue. Get ready to feel good and go deep. This is Bespoken Bones.
Hi, and welcome to Bespoken Bones, ancestors at the crossroads of sex, magic, and science. We are in the business of healing trauma, connecting with our roots, and developing radiant erotic wellness in past, present, and future generations. I am your host, Pavini Moray, and today I have the pleasure to introduce you to Erin Langley. And Erin is a mother, a fine artist, a writer, an acupuncturist, and an herbalist living in Oakland, California. She is the poetry editor for Rabble Lit, a magazine for working class literature. She helps people reconnect with their ancestors and decolonize for intergenerational health and social justice. Her ancestors are Celtic, Anglo-Saxon, Ashkenazi, Frank, Germanic, and the tribal peoples of the Caucasus region. She teaches courses on ancestral remembrance and sex magic and provides one-to-one counseling for ancestor work, dreaming, and divination. She practices acupuncture at Root and Stem Integrative Chinese Medicine Clinic, and her website is www.ancestralacupuncture.com. Hi, Erin, and welcome.
Hi, Pavini. Thank you so much for having me.
So glad and so grateful to have a chance to speak with you about this stuff today. Been really inspired by what I've been reading of your work on your website. Just wondering if you'd start us off with just speaking a little bit about the work that you do with ancestral acupuncture.
Sure. Well, I think I became an acupuncturist ultimately because I have too much love. And when I don't share the love in productive ways, it can quite literally destroy me. So I enjoy the challenge of loving very precisely. And what could be more precise than literally focusing love in the point of a needle? So I think it's a modality that suits my nature and one that I could really never get to the bottom of. So it keeps me engaged and curious and never bored. And I just love it. It's been my saving grace, especially during this first year of having a new baby. It's the thing that keeps me in the world and keeps me sane.
That's great. I love your explanation about the precision of love and the focus of the tip of a needle. That's beautiful. And what about it is ancestral?
Well, first, maybe I should talk about the ways that I explored my own ancestral healing traditions before I arrived at Chinese medicine. There are some similarities and some differences in those traditions. First of all, the healing traditions of my Celtic people, who I really identify with, are largely unavailable. Pieces, I think, can be recovered through research and through dreaming, and we can see the continuity of our ancestral medicine in Western herbalism. There's a lot of carryover there. And the plants themselves speak. And that's a practice of my indigenous medicine, is just listening to the way that the plants speak. And I feel like I have the capacity to hear when I make the space to listen. So I do make the effort, and I have made the effort to show up in my ancestral traditions. It was a colleague of mine in the Indigenous Mind program, Heidi Corning, who introduced me to my teacher, Liu Ming, in 2004. And so that's when I started studying the Chinese cosmology, including the calendrical arts. And eventually I enrolled in acupuncture school so I could practice the medicine.
So it sounds like you've really, what you're talking about is really seeking deeply in your own ancestry for healing medicines, and some of it being lost, and then turning to Chinese medicine and acupuncture to be able to give this very precise healing, yeah?
Yeah, and I think that we also have a lot of commonality, the Irish and the Chinese. When we know who we are, we can see the commonality. And it's not like a rushing to become one. It's just a noting of similarities and differences. And I think it's very useful. In the old texts, you'd see people asking druids the best hour to conceive a child or the best day to embark on a raid. And the Chinese calendar offers that same context. And that was one of the draws for me, just the fine and precise space-time context with which, I mean, we are the bloom of space-time. So it's basically just a way to describe our experiences. And I use it every day in my healing practice. It's the oldest continuous almanac in the world. And I also think that if we're going to practice another culture's medicine, it's important to know where we stand in our own heritage, if possible. I just try to bring my ancestors to the table. I think that I imagine all of our ancestors sitting around a table enjoying a feast. And if we're participating in a cosmology that is not born of our ancestry, and we don't have ancestors sitting at that table, then it can tend toward cultural appropriation rather than cultural sharing. So if none of our ancestors are at the table, they go hungry. And so I just want to make sure that it's a banquet and that my people are being fed and are feeding other people as well.
Yeah, I appreciate it that you hold it like that. And I feel like from reading some of the things that you've written, I definitely get that sense of your work that you are careful about how you move with it. I wonder if you'd speak a little bit about how you understand the body to be a continuation of the ancestors.
Sure. I need to find my place. I'm just basically trying to ground right now and find who I am.
I think that's what we're all doing every single day.
Yeah, I want to speak from my personhood. So I'm going to try to do that.
Yeah, thank you. It's much welcome and appreciated.
So I feel like we are a continuation of our ancestors in this body. We are the live wire at the fore of a vast ancestral circuitry, kind of the part that wiggles in the world, the part that moves and is most densely animate. I think our ancestors look to us for this reason because of the concentration of our power and our ability to move on the earth. And so maybe we can be really helpful in resolving issues for our lineage that are harder to manage from wherever they are living, or just to simply engage the gifts that we've been given. And that could be a form of resolution or just celebration. Maybe resolution looks like enjoyment sometimes. Like when I eat wild boar and it tastes so good and I know I must be feeding hundreds of people. I think we can get a lot done just by relaxing into our circumstances, which is a lot easier said than done. But we can also move mountains, as it were. We have the ability to make big movements for our ancestors. We hold a lot of power as people on earth, I think.
What you're saying about the wild boar reminds me of a friend of mine named Rose who gave me a practice of standing in the shower in the hot water and allowing the pleasure that's derived from that to be given as an offering to my ancestors, right? Because how miraculous is it to have a house where there's hot water that comes out of the walls?
Yes.
Yeah. So you're saying that pleasure, just enjoying, relax. I love that phrase, relaxing into our circumstances, pleasure, enjoyment, are ways we can nourish our entire ancestry in our own bodies. Yeah.
That's right.
Oh, that's great. What about dreaming and dreaming practices and ancestors?
Right. So dreaming is one of my great loves. Dreaming, sex, and death, I guess, are the big three. But dreaming is a portal for ancestral communication. It's a place where feelings and information can be easily transferred, like a node of connection. I did my master's thesis on dreaming, and it was called Reinstating the Role of Community Dreaming Using Traditional Protocol and Open Source Technology. Really rolls off the tongue, right?
That's a mouthful.
Yeah. So I created this database where we as dreamers can track our dreams by theme against an astronomical ephemeris to see what we were dreaming about when, individually and collectively. And so there are two things that have been really important in my recovery of dreaming traditions and ancestral dreaming. And mostly I'm bushwhacking. Like, I'm recovering something over many years, largely by myself from the ground up. And it's great because no one can take it from me. It's like an education that I've built and a rapport with my dreams that can't be broken. Just really courting my dreams and letting my dreams court me. And then doing the less sexy work of fastidious note-taking and marking correlations to eventually develop a dictionary of portent. So how do the dreams relate to waking life? Because it's a really meaningful feedback loop that generates a lot of useful information. And sometimes that information comes in dreams before it's available while we're awake. And our ancestors relied on dreams to recalibrate our society toward health. It's like expanding our biodiversity to include more information. So it makes us healthier. And all of our ancestors that have traditions that took dreams seriously because it has such a protective function. Like, our survival, in some cases, probably depended on dreaming. If we received information about an impending invasion, then that would change our behavior to prevent the invasion. So anchoring dreams in our waking life was a very practical thing to do. And I think that it still is. It still happens with us. Like, maybe this is something I see at work a lot. And I ask everyone about their dreams because there's a lot of diagnostic information in them. But maybe an illness will register in a dream before we notice it in our physical body. And we can amend our behavior as a remedy, or maybe we'll go to a doctor and maybe early treatment makes all the difference, for example. And I'm not an initiate, so I'm not initiated into any dreaming traditions, which means that my capacity as a dreamer is limited to what I've been able to access on my own. And of course, my ancestors' substantial body of inherited knowledge. But my dreaming has not been altered or enhanced by deliberate initiation as a dream doctor or practitioner who can work on people or land or a community from the dream world. I think I still do some of this work on my own, just naturally, but my culture has not really enlisted me to do this. So the skill set has kind of waned without demand and without more people doing it, frankly. I think more people working as professional dreamers makes path dreaming and dream doctoring easier. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Yeah, it does make sense. I know that that's some of the work of decolonization is around reclaiming, I mean, obviously lots of different medicinal traditions, but especially dreams and dream temples. And I know some folks who are doing that work. You're speaking a lot about this reclamation, remembering. And I know that you also are concern yourself with what is forgotten. The forgotten wounds is a phrase that I've heard you use. And would you speak a little bit about what does that mean and why are they important and how would we tend to them if we chose to do so?
Yeah, that's a big question. And I'm not sure I have a very good answer, but I think that forgotten wounds show up as a kind of negative space. Like, we, in some cases, in many cases, especially for people of European heritage, we have forgotten where we come from to the extent that we don't even see its importance or its relevance. There's this, actually, at the same time, there's a huge movement of European descended people who are embarking on the path of ancestral remembrance, which is awesome. Like, people will call me up, as they probably call you up, hot and bothered. And it's so cool, this ability to listen and respond to the call of our ancestors who are just itching to be heard. And I think that in a lot of cases, they haven't been heard in a long time. But also, a lot of us have forgotten that it's even important that we come from a place, from a land or a clan, as opposed to belonging to a nation, for example. Like, we're seeing this rise in nationalism right now. And in my opinion, it's really born of ancestral wounding. These Nazi rallies occur on the premise that certain ancestors are better than other ancestors. And this is a gross misunderstanding born of deep forgetfulness and pain. And I think that people who hate others blindly are deeply afraid to face their own pain. And even though it might not be as overtly alarming as outright hate and murder, and emphasizing the superiority of our ancestral identity, the other side of that coin is forgetting the importance of our origins to the extent that we don't see its relevance, and we become a whitewash. And we're not. We are our tribes, and our tribes are clamoring to be part of us. So, to answer your question about how the wounds can be faced, I think we're all facing them right now. And it looks like chaos in some instances. And in other cases, I think it's just a matter of waiting for a person to arrive at a place that's either desperate or curious enough to begin the ancestral healing. I think that right now, the upheaval is such fertile ground for ancestor work and ancestral healing. And a lot of people have been looking to me to begin that work. So I think it's happening all around us, and it looks different in every case.
Yeah, thank you. I want to add to that something, which is that it doesn't, like, those wounds, just because they're forgotten, it doesn't mean that they go away, right? And so then we have instances of transgenerational trauma where folks are responding out of their body, out of their biology, to something that they don't have conscious awareness of why they're responding in that way, right?
Right.
Until we tend the wounds, like, they're just gonna hang out. Like, unfortunately, we got handed a bunch of bullshit, basically, but it does need to be addressed.
Yeah, and we might not know why we're responding in a certain way. And I think that this is one of the reasons it's important to do the research to learn about our history as colonizers and as colonized people, because when we can see the context of our story, we might understand what's motivating our biology to react rather than respond.
Yeah, I think that's pretty spot on. So, speaking about biology, something that I'm pretty curious about is the uses of the erotic, and how we can use the erotic for lots of different things, kind of like that precision of the needlepoint. But in particular, how can we use the erotic to support our own remembering of our traditions, of our indigenous traditions?
I think just being in touch with our desire and sexuality is a large part of decolonization. Basically, any part of our experience that is dissonant with the mainstream society that we're living in is a good gateway toward decolonization. It's a good opportunity to look at our experiences and our judgments of those experiences, because pretty much anything that we can feel, our sexuality or anything, and human beings, we're just capable of profound pain, but it's not unique. And that's one of the cool things about humanity, is that we pretty much share a spectrum. And we think we don't. We think our pain is unique or extreme. But really, I think it's quite a narrow bandwidth, or even a pinhole. So I think just accepting our experiences is a really great way to including our sexuality, to remember our indigenous traditions. And now I'm thinking about like when I go to Ireland and certain rocks hit on me. And when you're walking through nature and you'll notice that a tree might fancy you, or just you might feel something sexual in or toward nature. And I think that that is a totally common experience that maybe people are generally shut off from, so we might not even notice it. But I think just noticing more of our actual experience, noticing the input of reality, which includes being embodied and having an experience of our surroundings, we will notice all kinds of things. And I think that that's a very simple form of re-indigening, is just being present to our experiences and not judging them against some cultural metric that doesn't hold much use, in my opinion.
It's great, Erin, that image of rocks hitting on you. It's just perfect. It's so ecosexual, right? And what I think I hear you saying is pay attention to what you're already experiencing. And like, you might just be walking through the woods and not be paying attention to that experience of being hit on by a rock, or you can turn your attention towards it, right? And that like, of course, all of our ancestors have had erotic connection with the earth, right? From my point of view, it's unquestionable. And so you're saying that like the experiences are there, we just have to return our attention to them.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, our whole mind, engage our whole mind, including all of our experiences, even the ones that don't seem to fit. The ones that don't seem to fit particularly. The misfit experiences, pay attention to those ones. Those are the good ones.
The ones that kind of stick out or strike you as unusual, or
yeah.
Okay, that's a great practice. I'd like to speak with you a little bit about your work as a writer, and first I just would be delighted if you would read something and share just a little bit of your writing with us.
Yeah, totally. We are evidence of old magic. Bodies are an ancient language. Some of us are still alive. We are endurance artists. The brightest are the darkest. Rainbows are broken light too. The oracles are convulsing. The dead are near. Even the saints are fucked up. Certainty is rooted in terror. Some lies are honest. We are what we deny. We are enchanted pain. Small tragedies are easier to grieve. Black magic is self-harm. All of these are spells. We are the only animals who think there's something better. We are fighting the sky. We are forbidden books that must be read in the night. We are fugitive clouds, destined to rain.
Thank you. Talk a little bit about the magic of speech and how our ancestors may have wielded words.
Yeah. So I'm surprised that we don't regard speech as magical. Maybe some of us do. I do. Probably a lot of us do. But anyway, words can heal us. They can impart deep healing, or they can like fuck us up for a lifetime. And we think that speech isn't magic. And my ancestors would use words in this way. Our poets would use satire, and we could ruin a king or even kill a person. It was believed that words could curse a person to the point of death. But I'm really interested in the capacity of language as spells, basically. Just that everything that we speak has an impact and lands in some way. And so as a practitioner of Chinese medicine, I'm also interested in exorcistic poetry, for example, or speaking words that heal the body. Like when I was having an asthma attack the other day, I wrote a poem about lungs being able to breathe. And I genuinely feel like it helped me breathe better in that moment.
Yeah, I'm just sitting with that a little bit about words as spells and the power of words. And again, this feels like one of those forgotten pieces, and remembering this of the magical act of speech and of writing,
Mm-hmm.
and you're saying of healing as well.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah. Okay, so let's change the channel a little bit, because when you and I were getting to know each other a little bit before the interview, you talked about being someone who has a forthright sexuality. And I'm curious of how you find that your sexuality reflects how your ancestors may have been sexual.
Yeah. In my Celtic culture, the sexual symbolism is just super overt, which is kind of funny because when I go to Ireland, I notice this overlay of modesty, which I really did not inherit. I mean, the Irish tell plenty of body jokes, so it comes out that way. But you can go to any number of churches and you see these Sheela-na-gigs carved in stone, which are these powerful images of old women bearing their vulva. And you touch them or pass under them for luck. So she basically protected the churches and prevented anything that didn't belong from passing through the door. And these are newer in the scheme of the Celtic iconography, I think like 13th century. But some of them feel a lot older, like especially the one at the Hill of Tara. There's a Sheela-na-gig there, which just feels timeless. And her persona is incredibly sexual and incredibly reductive in a purifying sense. So I really appreciate that about my heritage, that sexuality isn't just enjoyable, but it's even a force for purification. Or another example is like if you go to the museum at Newgrange, which is a megalithic monument on the Boyne River, you will see this phallic stone. It's exactly the size and shape of a penis, and it's got ridges and petroglyphs on it, which is like my freaking dream dildo, by the way. Oh my God. But I mean, so you know what we did with that. And I'm particularly interested too in, well, stones. I'm like super hot for stones for one thing, but I think that's not just me. I think there's something in my heritage because of that museum piece alone. What a wasted museum piece, right? But
it just makes you wonder, did they like wash it?
And the stone's capacity to store information is very interesting to me too. The way that these megalithic monuments do, you go there and it's just like a portal that rekindles memory, and it holds so much memory. So you can touch these stones and learn about your history in quite a literal way. So the stone penises, I feel, also store and have the ability to transmit information and memory. My friend Marcella the other day, she's a wonderful healer and Maya medicine woman. She brought me this stone, this beautiful, smooth stone. And my first thought was like, I can't wait to fuck this stone. And I think that's part of an ancestral piece, though I do personally delight in it as well. And like the kingship, right, at the Hill of Tara, where the king has sex with a white mare who is an embodiment of the land, and then he eats the horse. So this is like really visceral ritual. Like we're not afraid of life or death or sex. So he's like completely merging with the land, assimilating the land, because it's a partnership. So if the land takes a turn, or if illness visits the community, then you know the king is not tending to his sovereign partner. And I love that the sexuality is embedded in the wellness of our land and our bodies.
I went last year on an ancestral pilgrimage to England and Scotland. And one of the things that I learned while there was that when Christianity came to the British Isles, that the old religions had to be hidden, basically, and they had to be coded, and they were coded into the land and into the kinds of things that you're talking about. And so I just want to make sure that connection to memory is made explicit, that you were speaking about earlier, that like this information, like our ancestors, at least in the British Isles, deliberately, fucked stones and put that healing information in there so that later it could be reclaimed, right? So they knew what they were doing.
Yes.
And now, yeah.
They knew what they were doing. Yes, exactly. And it's a way that the information cannot be killed, because honestly, you have to be so alive to receive it. And I think that that's an important part of oral tradition as well, is that you can't kill the living cultural body because it wasn't written down. So you can't usurp something from a context that is no longer relevant and, thereby killing it. You either, I think you can receive it in dreams. You can definitely receive it from the land. And I have, and I miss that experience. I honestly kind of jones for the rush of ancestral memory in such a living way that those stones can give us.
Do you think that our ancestral reverence practices are these ways that we can decolonize our own bodies?
Yeah. I don't know how else to elaborate on that, though. Can you say more?
I think a resounding yes is great, actually.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Tell me a little bit about acupuncture and how it supports erotic wellness.
Yeah. Acupuncture can do all sorts of things to support erotic wellness. So, of course, I arrive at a diagnosis first, a framework that I'm working within. And sexual health and function often comes down to the kidneys. And the Chinese kidney is not the Western kidney organ as much as it is a set of functions that includes sexual wellness. So anyway, one of the things I do is I will actually light fires on people as a way to kindle sexual fire. It's a controlled burn. So I use something called moxibustion on certain portals on the person's body that relate to what they are needing for their erotic wellness. I also use a lot of herbs as aphrodisiacs. And I don't mean to suggest that erotic wellness means that you want to have sex, because I think there are a lot of people who are perfectly healthy in their eros who are not interested in having sex. But for people who are wanting to feel more sexual or less sexual, or to heal their relationship with sex and become more comfortable in their bodies or in their desire, there are all kinds of things that we can do with needles and herbs and cupping and moxibustion and just intention, and even just creating a space for healing and just listening. I set my treatment room every morning with mantra and visualization to create a space that is healing for people, which kind of takes the pressure off me so they can get what they need, regardless of my shortcomings. And sometimes something will just arise for a person that maybe they haven't had the opportunity to think about or experience or share before. And maybe that's the healing.
I like that idea of just intentionally creating this space and then allowing the healing to happen, right? That we all have the healing inside of us that we need. We just often need the space and the support to find our way to it.
Yeah, really just providing a space with good intention and putting the ball in their court is really usually what it comes down to.
So, premise, I have done my work around healing my lineages, and I have done my embodied work around healing my sexuality, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of want to get down and dirty. Like, tell me about sex magic. Tell me about the ancestral traditions around sex, maybe the older European traditions.
Well, I'm no expert. And again, it's something we don't know very much about. I have a body, so like that's a good place to start. I can speak from that, and I can speak from my experiences and whatever research I've done in books and in dreams. We know that the ancient Greek and Roman accounts of the pre-Christian Celts, anyway, they talk about men sleeping with men, which was really nothing even remarkable. Like, I don't think the Celts themselves would have noted that, but the outside observers noted that. So I think that that's great. I think that that's a really cool and normal thing for our people. I think that in our rituals, the gender of our partner that we might have paired up with was not super hetero necessarily. I love the gender fluidity of the Celts. I mean, there's even species fluidity, right? Which I wouldn't take it that far, but they had the ritual with the horse. We should totally edit that out.
I love that part. You know what else I love? I love that, like, I feel like you're giving me permission of like, oh yeah, Pavini, you got the gay from way back.
Yeah. Yeah, the gay goes way back.
That's an ancestral blessing.
Yeah. And what else? Something that I want to mention about our old time sexual practices is that it's not uncommon to be propositioned by the gods of our native pantheons, and that we should really be discerning with giving permission to move forward with a sexual relationship with spirits and gods, and maybe seek counsel from an elder in our traditions before we enter into that kind of relationship, because the gods are very well-rounded, just like we are. And a lot of times they're asking us to make a deal with them. And if we don't know what we're getting into, we can be basically enlisted in someone's agenda that we might not want to be a part of. And I see particularly a lot of young women, but also young men who maybe are just burgeoning in their sexuality. And that is a vulnerable time in which we're liable to be approached. Sensitive people with good imaginations, but it's not just our imaginations either. So I wanted to talk about that because I don't hear that many people talk about sex with gods and spirits. And usually they want something in return. And if you're entering into that relationship consensually, then that's one thing. But I think that a lot of young people are approached before we have the capacity to know what we're consenting to. So that's one thing that I want to bring up about our old sexual ways. And another thing that I love to practice is offering just using our orgasm as an offering to the land, an offering to our ancestors, but sort of like not hogging it, which we can totally do too. And I love to do that as well. But the idea of sexual practice as an offering or as an experience of reality in an expanded state. So all of our ancestors have sexual practices that put us in touch with something that's larger than ourselves. And I value that. And I also value our sexuality as an offering in and of itself.
The cautionary note is definitely much appreciated. You're right.
Yeah.
It can absolutely feel very flattering, I think, when we're approached by the unseen in erotic capacities. And one of the things that I like to talk about is that we get to have boundaries, just like we have boundaries with humans.
Yeah.
We get to be discerning, like just like we are with humans. Like, oh, do I really want to do that with that person? We can always set boundaries with deity, with spirit, with ancestors. We get to do that. Just because they're unseen doesn't mean that they're not untoward, right?
Right, exactly.
They could be creepy and lecherous, just like humans.
Yep.
Yeah, and the offering, I love the practice that you're bringing of the offering of the pleasure to the lands is beautiful. It's a blessing, right? To rain down our pleasure on the lands and to have that more expanded sense of ourselves. It's gorgeous.
Yeah, and when we're in that expanded state, it's sort of like having a megaphone held up to our intentions. So using the space of orgasm is a way to amplify our intention or create magic. If there's something that you really want to make, it's a good way to make it.
And it's really fun to be having an orgasm and trying to remember, like, fuck, what was my intention?
Right? Yeah. And another cool thing to try is to not contract against the ecstasy so that you're just riding the orgasm indefinitely, basically. Because if you are not contracting against it, it's sustainable. So I guess my longest orgasm is probably like an hour, and then I just sort of got tired.
Time for snacks.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Erin, thank you so much for blessing us with your wisdom and all the work that you've done to get to the point where we could have this interview and you could share these things. It's good to be on the planet with you. I appreciate it. And I appreciate your ancestors. And I hope this has delighted them and brought them joy as we've laughed and been a little bit raunchy together. And I just wonder if you would be willing to just take us towards home with some words.
Yes. This is a piece that kind of reminds me of your show, and it's written from the point of view of life. I go down on bones and stars and stones. I call down the dead and bring them to bed. I lay down with gods and beggars and frauds. I go down in history like any good mystery.
Oh my God. Wow. That's fantastic. Erin, thank you. Many blessings on you and your work. And if you want to, I imagine everyone is going to be really wanting to get in contact with you. So let me just tell folks that your contact info is on your website, which is www.ancestralacupuncture.com. Ancestralacupuncture.com. And thank you, Erin, and thank you, listeners, for being with us for this episode. I am Pavini Moray, and I've been here with Erin Langley, and I will be back every full and new moon with more embodied goodness and ancestral wisdom.
Thank you so much.